The Kings are 15 games into their season, and who knows, maybe for you, when you're listening to this, it's 16, 17, 18 games. Doesn't really matter. The same will all apply. I feel like 15 games into the season, it's a nice threshold to be able to kind of look at where the Kings are at, look at where the league is at. But by no means are things set in stone yet. So many things could still change. Every team really is still trying to mesh, but we can have some takeaways from the first 15 games. And I think if you look at it, how Mike Brown looks at it and how the Kings are looking at the schedule, which is the way that I've been viewing it this season if you've watched any of my post-game recap videos. The Kings break up their schedule into 5-game stretches. And you want to go 3-2 in each stretch. So the Kings have now finished 3 of those 5-game stretches. They went 3-2 in their first 2 and 2-3 in this latest one to put them at a record of 8-7. 9-6 if they would have won that game against Atlanta, and if the referees wouldn't have screwed them, which I'm still mad about, that would have felt a lot better than 8-7, and they would have been 3-2 in each of their first 3 5-game series. But at the end of the day, there's not too big of a difference between 8-7 and 9-6. And with the injuries that the Kings had in this latest stretch, I feel like we can live with that. And hopefully the Kings are going to get healthy. It feels like they're going to be healthy very soon here. And so I would say 8-7 is an okay spot to be. I don't even know where that puts the Kings in the West, to be honest. I try not to look at the standings at this point in the season. I just don't think there's a point to. I mean, I know the Kings are right around anywhere from probably 6th to 12th in the West or something like that. That's what I would guess. And I'm not looking because I don't care. 15 games in the season is way too early to be looking at the standings. There's just so many different things going on with different teams. Some teams starting out very hot, some teams starting out cold, like the Timberwolves and the Mavs starting out a little cold, the Warriors starting out very hot, the Rockets starting out very hot. Who knows? Maybe all of those things will continue for the entire season, or maybe everything will switch up by the end of the season. And so that's why I don't think there's really a point to look at the standings at this point. I think the better thing to do is just look at what the Kings have done and ignore what everyone else is doing at this point in the season. And so the Kings have put themselves right in the thick of things at 8-7, staying above 500. And they've withstood these injuries a bit. And so now the question kind of is, can they get healthy? Can they mesh? And can they go on a little bit of a win streak that they've set themselves up for? Because that's really the key. At some point, they have to go on a winning streak here. For the first part of the season, we can live with just skating above 500, just getting by. But then you kind of do that until you go on that big streak. Offensively, the Kings have been super cold from the three-point line to start the season. They're starting to heat up. Their bench was awful. That's starting to heat up, right? So there are these different things that you're hoping are leading in the right direction that will lead to some sort of great stretch that puts the Kings in a very good position in the standings going forward. And I think the best way to kind of evaluate how the Kings have been doing so far this season is kind of comparing this season to last season and really seeing how DeMar DeRozan is meshing with the rest of the team, because I think that was always the big question coming into this season. That is the most important thing, how DeMar DeRozan fits both offensively and defensively for this team, and how this team is changing because of that from last season. And I think what we have seen with the fit of DeMar DeRozan early in the season is that the Kings, they still do have that free-flowing motion offense that they've had the past 2 seasons. But now they just have that different ability to change speeds, slow things down when they need to. And a lot of times that comes in the fourth quarter, and that's where the Kings struggled last season. They struggled in the clutch. It was a lot of Fox, iso ball, and maybe a little bit of Monk, and no one else could do anything in fourth quarters. And the Kings didn't have the ability to play that way and to play slower. And so then at times in fourth quarters, they would try to play really fast, even though they had leads. and they would turn the ball over, or they would just start missing shots, it would lead to the other team going on a big run and coming back. Or they would try to slow things down and it wouldn't go well. More turnovers leading to the other team coming back. The Kings blew a lot of fourth quarter leads last season because of this. And I do think you have seen DeMar DeRozan help this. He's helped the Kings maintain some leads. Now, they did lose a few clutch games early, and they did have leads in those fourth quarters. And I think the Kings were still figuring things out in those first few games against the Timberwolves. Against the Lakers, it was more so LeBron going off, and the Lakers did end up getting the lead early in that fourth quarter. And then the Kings started coming back. And then past those first two games, the Kings have looked really good down the stretch of fourth quarters. And DeMar DeRozan has been a big part of that. DeMar has been amazing. He's been everything that we've expected and more when it comes to his mid-range shot making, his clutch ability. And DeMar and Fox have both been the guys in the clutch that they are supposed to be and that they are touted as. We've seen games where it goes from DeMar, he hits a few shots, then they go to Fox, he hits a few shots, and that's just really hard for defenses to contain. So that's a very encouraging sight that both of them are able to just kind of trade off in the fourth quarter. But then also this applies to outside of the fourth quarter, because obviously there's a lot more game than just the fourth quarter, although the fourth is the most important. And I think you've seen Fox and DeMar passing the baton as who is the primary scorer throughout the game, where it kind of goes quarter by quarter, stretch by stretch. There are some stretches where it feels like neither of them take over. I feel like the start of the fourth is one of those. Usually the Kings start the fourth with Fox, DeMar, no Sabonis. That stretch has been rough for the Kings, I think, because both of them are trying to save it for later in the fourth. It's like we need someone to take that slot. It's like the time slot at work, the shift that no one wants to take. Everyone wants later in the fourth. No one wants earlier in the fourth. But I just think that we've seen plenty of the Kings' offensive ability to maintain a free-flowing ball movement offense, very fast-paced offense, despite the addition of DeMar DeRozan, because that was something that some people were worried about. The Bulls with DeMar just played very slow, and I think the Kings have integrated him well to the point where their offense has still been very good and very fast. But then throughout the game, when another team goes on a run, they're able to go to DeMar in the post. And I think what's important is he's able to get the ball and be someone who's not going to turn the ball over very much, but he's going to eat clock. He's going to get to the free throw line. He's done it in multiple games where the other team is kind of going on a run. The Kings are playing poorly. They're shooting poorly. And DeMar keeps the Kings attached by going to the free throw line. The Portland game is a great example of this, where the offense was struggling and DeMar just kept the Kings in the game in the first half because he just kept getting to the free throw line. That's something the Kings haven't had in the past, and also something the Kings haven't had when he's been out injured. I mean, Fox did have 19 free throws in a game, but that was very much an outlier. He hasn't been able to get to the free throw line, not for a lack of trying, but it's definitely been fun to see the Kings have a guy that can get to the free throw line as much as DeMar. And the Kings have been one of the top offensive teams despite being one of the last teams in three-point percentage. And they've been moving up. They were in last for quite a while. They're moving up now. And that depth is starting to come along after the Kings were forcing DeMar and Keegan and Sabonis and Fox to play 40-plus minutes. Like, that was never sustainable. Could it have something to do with the injuries? Maybe, maybe not. Could it have something to do with Keegan having a very slow start offensively? Yeah, I mean, it's very possible. But I think when it comes to that bench, most of those bench guys, it's three-point shooting. It's Trey Lyles, Keon Ellis, Jordan McLaughlin. Like, those are three-point shooters. And so when they started the season not hitting their threes, that led to them getting benched. I mean, even Malik Monk wasn't hitting his threes off the bench. Obviously, he contributes in other ways offensively. He's never been just a three-point shooter, but still, the bench just really struggling from three. And so now that they've had to incorporate more depth with the injuries that have come along, those bench guys, those depth guys have started to hit from three. That's what kept them in the game against Atlanta game against Utah. And so it's just a matter of putting those two things together. The ability to maintain a great offense from inside the arc, not having a high 3-point rate, not having a high 3-point percentage, but having a super high percentage in the mid-range and at the rim and at the free throw line. I mean, the free throw line was a massive problem for the Kings last season. Now that DeMar's gone out, again, it's a problem. So DeMar is very much the key to that. But they need to be able to put that together with the 3-point shooting that they've now gotten. And the bench has showed up in terms of 3-point shooting. They still need Keegan Murray and Kevin Huerter to show up in terms of 3-point shooting as well. So the Kings offense has been better this season than it was last season. And that's very much the Kings' strength, as everyone expected. But then on the defensive side, that's where people had a lot of questions, obviously. That's never been the Kings' strong suit. But the one thing I will say is the Kings were an average defensive team last season. And that was with Harrison Barnes as the starter. And so the only change you're making is DeMar DeRozan going into the starting lineup. Because everything else is the same. Like, yeah, you don't have Davion Mitchell. I don't know. It just doesn't really change much when you add in Jordan McLaughlin. That's not the thing that's going to just completely change the defense. It's pretty much the same defense minus HB plus DeMar DeRozan. And they were average last season. And what I've seen so far is DeMar DeRozan is absolutely an upgrade defensively. Now, by no means is he a great defender. Probably not even a good defender. But he sure is better than Harrison Barnes. He's more mobile. He gets in the passing lanes. He gets blocks. He's a great help defender. He's not great in terms of closing out on shooters. Sometimes he gets caught hunting steals in the passing lanes a little too much. But I think those steals and blocks as the help defender are that's what I expected him to come in and do. That's something Harrison Barnes didn't do. So that has improved the defense. Now, that's not going to take the Kings defense to a whole nother level, but it's definitely not going to make the Kings defense worse. Also, the Kings starting unit, plus really any unit with the big four in it, in Sabonis, DeMar, Fox, and Keegan, any unit with those four guys is going to be solid defensively. People who don't watch the Kings might not realize that, but it is true. Those guys are very connected defensively. Obviously, Keegan has been amazing defensively this season. Fox has as well. Sabonis has been very solid. And then you just add in another guy. When Keon Ellis is out there, it's an amazing defense. Huerter has been a very solid team defender this season, getting a whole bunch of steals. Monk has not been a good defender, but the lineup's defense doesn't come crashing down when Monk is in there. And so the Kings are still a pretty average defensive team. The place where they absolutely need help defensively is their wing depth defensively. That has been their weakness for quite a while. It still is. And when you look at this Kings roster, it doesn't seem great defensively. So the fact that they are average defensively with just no wing defenders off the bench, I'm like, is it too good to be true? That if you just add in one really good wing defender to this bench or the starting lineup, either way, would that make them a top 10 defense? Like, is that crazy to assume? Because there are just so many times where you watch the games and you're just like, man, if they just had one more guy that could defend on the wings, like if they had a Toumani Camara, maybe you're not getting someone as good defensively as Toumani Camara, but a Cam Johnson or something. Like if they just have one guy out there that you can just throw out there and be another wing defender and take pressure off Keegan Murray, you pair that with Keon Ellis off the bench, whether he's starting or off the bench doesn't really matter. I think there is the possibility of a top 10 defense in here. I feel like there's a lot of talk about rim protection, about the possibility of pairing another big alongside Sabonis. For me, like, sure, that would be a dream if you could get a Chet Holmgren or a Victor Wembanyama or even a Jaren Jackson Jr. But for me, that's just not realistic. Like, you're not going to find that guy. It's like you tried Alex Len. Obviously, he's not that guy. Orlando Robinson has some people hoping he could be that guy. It's just like, that's not happening. I don't think you're going to find a guy that you are going to pair alongside Sabonis. I just think that's so unlikely. And so I think that there's just no point to focus on getting one rim protector, and you just have to focus on getting the wing defense, the versatile wing defenders that can really help this team, especially as on-ball defenders, because I think the Kings have some solid team defenders. Like I said, Kevin Huerter and DeMar DeRozan have been very solid team defenders this season, but you just need another on-ball defender. The Kings are near the top of the league in terms of deflections, and that's how they need to play. They need to be physical, they need to be in the passing lanes because they aren't the best on-ball team. The Kings have to blitz a lot on screens, blitz the other team's best players. You saw it with Devin Booker, Trey Young. That's just how the Kings have played a lot this season, putting two on the ball. That is really what's leading to high three-point percentages from other teams. And I think having a more switchable roster would help that. And I think one wing defender would help a lot. When you're looking at how some of the individuals have performed this season, we can start with De'Aaron Fox. He had a bit of a slow start to the season. Slow, maybe in quotation marks, like he was fine. He was scoring the ball. It just wasn't quite what we know that Fox can do offensively. There was, the 0 for 11 game from 3. He just wasn't having the most efficient start, wasn't touching the paint the most. He had some good games, some bad games. Definitely not a bad start to the season, but just lately, he's taken it to a whole different level. And he's done it. It's about him using his speed, constantly getting into the paint. And it's about that in-between game. He's just been automatic. I feel like his mid-ranger has looked a lot better. And then it's floater, floater, floater. I mean, his finishing is obviously incredible as well. And my stat to watch for him coming into the season was percentages inside the arc. And he has been just incredible. And what I love that he's doing lately that I don't think he did earlier in the season is it's attack first and then set up the 3-ball off of that. Not shoot the 3-ball, hope it goes in so that then you can, have a guy come out further on you and then attack. He's flipped that, and I think that's really what's leading to a lot of success for him. And so now the question is, can he maintain that over a long stretch, and can he continue to do that when everyone is healthy? And if he can, then I have absolutely zero worries about the Kings making the playoffs because he is that good when he's getting into the paint. He's also near the top of the league in deflections. He's not near Dyson Daniels, but he's near the top of the league among everyone else. And I feel like he's gotten a lot of clutch steals, and he's been very good at anticipating passes and getting steals on the defensive end. So he's been rounding into form. It's been very fun to watch. Now they need a little help once guys get healthy around him. For Domantas Sabonis, the big thing is just how confident he's looked with his jumper. He's had an all-around great start to the season, but his free throw numbers are way up. He feels like he's automatic in the mid-range. He's a 40% three-point shooter on higher volume than he took last season. And it really just looks like he's way more confident. And the big part that's been very different this season for me is that he's doing it in the fourth quarter. He's doing it in the clutch. So many times last season, he could have had shots. He could have taken the ball himself and gone to the rim, but he just deferred so much to Fox. This season, he's been shooting a lot more in important moments, and he's been very good in those moments. He hasn't been deferring, and so I've just loved the aggressiveness from him to start this season. DeMar, like I mentioned, I think he's been better defensively than was expected, but the thing for him is just his efficiency. He is making the Kings one of the most efficient teams in the league. He is like almost single-handedly increasing the team's free throw percentage by like 10%. Obviously, like I mentioned, Sabonis has been better from the free throw line, so has Fox, but it feels like it's mostly down to DeMar, mainly because of his volume that he's shooting from there. Individually, great start to the season. Great start to the season for the 3 stars of the Kings, and they just need a little more help from other guys, a few more performances. Like Keegan, he's been amazing defensively. His rebounding has been incredible. He's completely flipped who he was from his rookie year. His rookie year, catch and shoot, great shooter, bad at everything else. This season, been struggling to shoot the ball, but has been amazing at everything else. Taking the number 1 player on the other team, getting a bunch of double-doubles, second on the team in rebounding. There are just times where he needs to be more aggressive and also just flat out, he's got to shoot the ball better. And some of that might come with less of a load on him, just needs less minutes possibly, but also he has never been a great shooter at the start of seasons, so hopefully he just needs to heat up a bit here. I wish that he would take the ball and take smaller guys inside, but it just doesn't seem like that's totally who he is. So I feel like the Kings maybe need to draw up some more plays for him to get the ball inside against smaller guards. Like if he's not going to do it himself, I feel like the coaching staff and, Sabonis and Fox operating the offense, they need to make a concerted effort to get the ball to Keegan and get him going at smaller defenders to punish those guys. Because if he can start really punishing smaller defenders, either one, that's going to force teams to change the matchup and give more favorable matchups to Fox and DeMar, or he's just going to keep scoring. So I think that's really what can take the Kings offense to a completely different level, but he's been amazing defensively and such a valuable piece to this team early on. Kevin Huerter has been in the starting lineup as the more veteran player among the guys competing for that spot. He's had his ups and downs, and at this point in the season, it's been more downs. And I mean, the Hawks game was a big part of that, with him just missing a bunch of open threes and going 1 for 10 from 3. I mean, he was horrible against Minnesota, but then he had a great game against Utah. And those were moments where we needed him when guys were out. So it's like, yeah, he's had some big games, but I mean, he just needs to shoot the ball better. He is not shooting well from 3 this season. He's been a solid team defender, but for him to really make an impact, he's just got to shoot the ball better. I think right now, he's still the starter, but Keon Ellis just went off. And if that continues, then I think it will very quickly change, because it's a battle for that starting shooting guard spot in my mind. Kevin Huerter, as the player who had a longer track record in the NBA, got the nod. But if he continues shooting like this, and if Keon regains his confidence and he is shooting with confidence, then I don't see any reason why Keon wouldn't take that spot. And we can go straight to Keon. He's still showing his great defensive instincts and abilities. Is super important just because of his versatility. But as an inexperienced player, I think he just went through a rough patch early in this season. And, he hasn't been as aggressive as he's needed to be offensively. And that's why he's gotten benched at times. But hopefully this Atlanta game was the huge breakout he needed. The fact that he had made 2 threes, and then that third one in the corner, he just rose up right over a defender that was tight on him. Like, that is what is super encouraging. Another moment where he attacks a closeout, makes a nice pass to Doug McDermott in the corner. Those are the things he needs to do to be able to gain that starting spot. So hopefully he has his confidence now. Malik Monk, slow start in terms of shooting the ball. I also think it was a slow start overall for him. Don't think he was good defensively, but I feel like right before his injury, he started to get things going offensively, especially in the pick and roll. I felt like he just kind of struggled to find his spot in the new Kings offense. And right before his injury, it felt like he was starting to hit a groove. He's never been the most consistent shooter. I'm sure that will come and go. But it's about him being able to operate in the pick and roll with Sabonis, him being able to attack the rim. Those are the important things. And I felt like we were just seeing him start to find his groove right before the injury. And so hopefully he can just pick up where he left off once he comes back. Trey Lyles, very rough start to the season. Like, awful start to the season. He was almost unplayable, except for the fact that we had no one else to play. And you can point at him not having a preseason. And it kind of does feel like that's the reason, because he just slowly started to play better and play better. And the reason that he is so key is because he is the key to the 5-out offense for the Kings. When he is the small ball 5, if he's shooting well, if he's playing well offensively and defensively and rebounding the ball, then the Kings can go with that smaller lineup, and those smaller lineups are super effective. When he's not shooting the ball super well, those small lineups can be very rough. And also he has to be good defensively, and he's been taking charges and rebounding well. So that's super important when he's playing the small ball 5. And he's been much better lately. So very good signs for the Kings bench. And Jordan McLaughlin, he has been super important as a ball handler. Didn't get much opportunity early on, which I didn't like. Now he's gotten more opportunity. He's settled in. Very few mistakes. Has allowed Fox to play off the ball at times. and has just been super solid, scoring when he needs to score, facilitating when he needs to facilitate. Solid defender. 3-point shot looks good. He hit a huge one against Utah. So very happy with him to start this season. Alex Len has had a rough start to the season. He's had some moments lately, but like the hands of stone has looked really worrying. He hasn't defended well in space, and I feel like he's had more negative minutes than positive minutes this season, which wasn't the case last season. And so you have Orlando Robinson coming along, trying to take that spot. He hasn't played much coming back from injury. Gave some really solid minutes in his first game. Looked like he could stretch the floor. So that's very intriguing. And he just looked like he was moving better than Len and catching the ball, but it's very early. Didn't look as good in his second game, so that'll be an interesting battle. Orlando Robinson versus Alex Len when we need to go to a big guy. And if neither of them play super well, then it's just going to be a lot of Trey Lyles at the 5. Just quickly going through some other guys. Doug McDermott has been solid. And, he hasn't found his way shooting the 3 ball quite yet. Feels like he's coming along. Had a good shooting game last game. And has been better than expected defensively. And the Kings need wing help, so he's getting minutes. And I've been pretty happy with him. And then the other guy that's gotten some minutes is Isaac Jones, and he's looked very good in those minutes. And in Stockton was knocking down the 3, looked good defensively, looked like he was moving really well defensively, and his defensive instincts were good, which was kind of my worry with him in Summer League. And so he's come in, given some really solid minutes in the NBA, and looks like a player that we should continue to give a shot to. And then we got Mason Jones, Colby Jones. They've, had good games in the G League, but I just don't see much from them in terms of being NBA players. Colby has been disappointing. His shot does not look all that encouraging. And while I feel like he has good instincts defensively, he just is slow and not good enough athletically to make up for his faults. So I hope he can come along. He still is a young-ish player, but it hasn't been super encouraging for either Mason Jones or Colby Jones when they've gotten opportunity. And then the last guy is Isaiah Crawford, who's been solid in the G League, but hasn't been given any NBA minutes, which I was kind of surprised with the injuries for the Kings. I wish we would have seen him because, if he continues to play well in the G League, blocks, steals, defensive monster, 3-point shooting, that's something the Kings could always use on the wing. So I hope he's given an opportunity at some point. It felt like this would have been the opportunity with the injuries, but guess not. Overall, I'm fairly confident with where the Kings are at. It would have felt a lot better if they were 9-6 than 8-7. But again, that doesn't really mean much in terms of how they've played. I feel like they're starting to put things together. It's just about the depth continuing to play well once guys come back from injury. And if they can, at the deadline, like put themselves in a good spot by the deadline, they could possibly put themselves in a spot where they make a Mavericks-like move, where just bringing in one really good wing player like the Mavs did with PJ Washington could have them skyrocketing up the standings. I'm not saying they would make the finals because of that, but it does feel like the Kings are one move away from being very clearly a top 6 team in the Western Conference and maybe even a top 4 at this point. But right now, with where the roster is at, feels like they're going to be hovering right around play-in versus top 6. I mean, it feels like, 5 through 11, 12 in the Western Conference could be very close. So while I'm confident in this Kings team, at some point they really need to show it and go on a run, because you can't just keep seeing positive signs. Like at some point you got to get big results. But for now, I'm happy above 500. Anyways, that is it for this episode of the Roll Report. As always, shout out to the members of this channel, No Rain and Joe Mama. Let me know what you guys think about the Kings' start to the season, where you think they're at, and I will see you guys in the next one. Peace.